The Girl in the Rain. The storm rolled across the moors like an angry beast. The wind howled through the black heather, and the rain came down in unrelenting sheets, blurring the outlines of the distant hills. The road that cut through the valley was little more than a ribbon of mud and stones, and the flickering glow of a lantern could barely be seen through the tempest. Lord Nathaniel Harrow, master of Blackthorn Hall, drew his cloak tighter as his horse trudged forward, hooves splashing through the muck. The evening had gone from grey to impenetrable blackness within minutes, and he cursed himself for venturing out so late. He was returning from the market town of Windermere, where his steward had failed to meet him as planned. The errand had been tiresome, supplies, ledgers, and the petty arguments of tenants. But Nathaniel found a strange comfort in such routines. They were predictable, orderly, safe. He'd known too much chaos in his youth to crave anything else. But tonight, fate had no care for order. As he rounded a bend, his horse suddenly shied, snorting and stamping. The lantern swung wildly in his hand, throwing fractured light upon the rain-slick road. And there, through the downpour, he saw her. A figure, a young woman standing alone in the storm. She was drenched to the bone, her gown torn and clinging to her frame. Her hands were clasped tightly before her, as though in prayer, and her dark hair hung loose about her face, plastered by the rain. For one disorienting moment, Nathaniel thought he beheld an apparition, some ghost of the moor come to haunt the living. Then she turned her face toward the light, and he saw terror in her eyes. He swung down from his horse without thinking. "Miss!" he called over the roar of the wind. "Are you hurt?" She did not answer, only stumbled backward, her lips trembling. Nathaniel approached carefully, his boots sinking into the mud. "You'll freeze to death out here. Come, there's shelter at my hall." The woman shook her head violently, her voice barely audible. "Please, no, they might find me." Her accent was refined, her tone educated, but her fear was raw, unguarded. Nathaniel frowned. "Who might find you?" Lightning split the sky behind her, throwing her silhouette into sharp relief. She flinched, clutching her shawl tighter, and whispered, "Please, don't make me go back." The Lord's expression softened. Whatever had brought her here, she was clearly in distress. He took off his cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders despite her protests. The fabric nearly swallowed her, but she clutched it as though it were the only thing keeping her alive. "My name is Nathaniel Harrow," he said quietly. "I mean you no harm. My home is close. You can warm yourself by the fire, and we'll speak no more of this until you're ready." She hesitated, gaze darting between him and the endless darkness behind her. The storm's fury grew. A crash of thunder rolled across the hills, and she finally nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. He guided her to his horse, lifting her gently into the saddle before mounting behind her. She was trembling, partly from cold, partly from fear, and he could feel the rapid beat of her heart even through the soaked fabric. The ride to Blackthorn Hall took less than 15 minutes, but it felt longer. The rain came harder, and Nathaniel had to squint to see the faint outline of the gates through the mist. When they reached the courtyard, a stable boy came running, startled to see his master returning with a strange woman clinging to him. "Hot water and blankets," Nathaniel ordered, "at once." "Yes, my lord." He led her inside, through the wide oak doors, and into the cavernous entrance hall. The fire in the hearth burned low, but its glow cast a golden light over the polished floors and portraits of grim ancestors. She looked around with wide, uncertain eyes. The grandeur seemed to unsettle her rather than comfort her. "Sit," Nathaniel said gently, motioning toward the fire. "You're safe now." She obeyed, sinking into the chair nearest the hearth. Steam began to rise from her sodden clothes. He handed her a towel and turned to the maid who had hurried in. "Bring tea, and have cook prepare something warm. She'll stay in the east guest room tonight." The maid blinked in surprise, but curtsied quickly. "At once, my lord." When they were alone, Nathaniel poured brandy into a glass and placed it in her shaking hands. "Drink this. It'll steady you." She looked at it uncertainly, then took a small sip. The colour returned faintly to her cheeks. After a long silence, Nathaniel spoke again. "What is your name?" She hesitated, her fingers tightened around the glass. "Eleanor," she said at last. "Eleanor Graves." It sounded rehearsed somehow, but he let it pass. "Well, Miss Graves, you were fortunate I came upon you. That road is deserted for miles. Were you travelling alone?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She shook her head faintly. I was with someone, but the carriage overturned near the ravine. She stopped abruptly, as though catching herself. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Did someone else survive? She looked into the fire. "I don't know." There was something in her tone, a weight, a sorrow, that told him pressing her now would yield nothing but pain. He stood and poured himself a glass. "You can rest here until morning. We'll send for your family when the storm passes." At that, she flinched violently. "No!" Nathaniel froze, glass halfway to his lips. "No!" Her breath came fast. "Please, you mustn't send for anyone. No one can know I'm here." For a moment, only the fire crackled between them. Then he said quietly, "Are you in danger, Miss Graves?" Her gaze flickered up to meet his. "I don't know any more." He studied her, her torn gown, the bruises, just visible on her wrists, the haunted look in her eyes. Whatever her story, it was not a simple one. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. You'll have your secrecy for now." Relief flooded her face, though it was tempered by exhaustion. As the storm raged on outside, Eleanor's eyes fluttered closed. Her head fell to one side, and for the first time that night, she slept, fitfully, like someone afraid of their own dreams. Nathaniel watched her for a long moment before turning away. The firelight played across his sharp features, revealing a flicker of something long buried, protectiveness. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know what she had fled. But somehow, he knew this. Whatever haunted her had now come to haunt him too. Whispers in the manor morning came reluctantly to Blackthorn Hall. Grey light spilled through the tall arched windows, slicing through the lingering smoke of the hearth. The storm had passed, leaving the moors shrouded in mist. Rainwater still trickled from the gargoyles along the roof, each drop echoing faintly in the vast silence of the house. Lord Nathaniel Harrow had not slept. He stood by the library window, one hand braced against the frame, watching the clouds drift over his lands. His reflection in the glass looked older than his 32 years. Dark hair unkempt, jaw shadowed, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. He told himself it was simply worry for a stranger under his roof, but he knew it was more than that. It had been years since anything unexpected had crossed the threshold of Blackthorn Hall. He'd built his life on quiet order. The estate, the tenants, the accounts, nothing to stir the old ghosts. And yet, one storm, one frightened woman had unsettled it all. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "My lord," came the familiar voice of Mrs. Weatherby, the housekeeper. "The young lady's awake." He turned, his expression unreadable. "And? She is weak, sir, but resting. I've set her in the east chamber, as you asked. Miss Eleanor." The woman hesitated, lowering her voice. "She does not speak much, my lord. Only that she does not wish to be found." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "And the servants?" "Already whispering, sir," Mrs. Weatherby admitted with a sigh. "They think she's a runaway bride, or worse. You know how tongues wag in a house like this." He exhaled slowly. "Then make it clear that any servant caught gossiping will find themselves dismissed before the week's end." "Yes, my lord." When she had gone, Nathaniel lingered a moment longer before heading toward the east corridor. The guest chamber door was slightly ajar, and he paused on the threshold. Inside, sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, turning the air pale gold. Eleanor sat in a chair by the window, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked fragile, too fragile for the world that had thrown her into the rain. Her gaze drifted over the gardens below, though her mind seemed far away. "You shouldn't be up yet," Nathaniel said softly. She started, turning toward him. "Forgive me. I didn't wish to impose any longer than necessary." "You're no imposition," he said, stepping into the room. "You nearly froze to death last night. It will take time to recover. I've taken enough of your kindness, Lord Harrow. I'll be gone by tomorrow." He frowned. "Gone where?" She hesitated. "Anywhere but here." There it was again, that quiet panic beneath her voice. He moved closer, his tone gentling. "Miss Graves, if you are running from something, this house will keep you safe. But if you wander into the moors alone, you'll find only ruin. Whatever troubles you carry, you needn't face them in the rain." Her eyes glistened, but she turned away. "You don't understand." "Then help me to." Eleanor looked at him then, truly looked, and something in his gaze seemed to disarm her. "If I tell you," she whispered, "you'll send me back." He shook his head. "That will depend on where back is." She said nothing. Nathaniel knew he would get no more that morning. He inclined his head politely. "Breakfast will be sent up. The doctor will call by midday. Until then, rest." When he left, she sank back into the chair, trembling. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, pale and hollow-eyed. "He doesn't know what I've done," she thought miserably. "If he did, he'd have left me in the storm." Downstairs, the manor was already alive with whispers. In the servants' hall, the kitchen-maid Clara leaned close to the footman. "They say she was found on the moor like a ghost," she murmured. "Not a carriage in sight." The footman crossed himself. "I heard her gown was torn to ribbons. Perhaps she escaped some villain." "Or perhaps she is one," Clara said, eyes wide. Their gossip halted abruptly as Mrs. Weatherby swept in. "Enough chatter! The girl's to be treated as a guest, Lord Harrow's orders." But the whispers did not die. By afternoon, the entire household knew there was a mysterious woman in the East Wing, and that she feared being found. Later that day, Nathaniel returned from the stables. Mud still clung to his boots as he entered the library, where his old friend and local physician, Dr. Rowan, was waiting by the fire. Rowan looked up from his glass. "Your message was intriguing, Nate. You never summon me for anything short of death or disaster." Nathaniel poured himself a drink. "Perhaps this is both." "Ah," the doctor said, amused. "So it's a woman." Nathaniel shot him a warning look, but Rowan only chuckled. "Tell me." He recounted the events of the night, the storm, the figure in the rain, the fear in her eyes. When he finished, Rowan's amusement had faded. "You believe she's in danger?" "I'm certain of it, but she won't say from whom." Rowan nodded, thoughtfully. "I'll examine her. Perhaps she'll trust me more easily." Women often do when they sense a physician's discretion. "Discretion," Nathaniel repeated dryly. "Something you've never been accused of." The doctor laughed and went upstairs. When he entered Eleanor's chamber, she sat stiffly on the edge of the bed. Rowan's kindly demeanour softened the tension in the air. "I'm Dr. Rowan, miss, a friend of Lord Harrow's. I only wish to ensure your health after last night's ordeal." She allowed the examination, though her eyes darted to the door with every sound from the corridor. "You've bruises on your wrists," Rowan said gently. "From rope, I'd wager. And the cut on your temple. How came that about?" "I fell," she said quickly. "Of course you did." He sighed, scribbling a note in his little book. "Well, no fever, though you're malnourished. I'll have cook send up a proper meal." As he rose, she caught his sleeve. "Please, doctor, do not tell him anything." Rowan's gaze softened. "You have my word. But, Miss Graves, secrets have a way of unravelling, especially under this roof. Be careful whom you trust." That evening, Nathaniel dined alone in the great hall, the flicker of candlelight glinting off silverware. He had grown used to solitude since his wife's death 6 years before. Yet tonight it felt heavier, filled with questions that refused to leave him. Why had Eleanor been out there? Who was she fleeing? As he brooded, footsteps echoed softly behind him. He turned to see her standing hesitantly at the doorway, wearing one of the housemaid's spare gowns. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for saving me." He rose from his chair. "You owe me no thanks, Miss Graves. Anyone would have done the same." Her eyes flickered. "I'm not sure anyone else would have stopped." Nathaniel hesitated. Then, in a rare impulse, he offered a small, wry smile. "Perhaps not, but you'll find I have a habit of interfering in things best left alone." A hint of laughter escaped her, a fragile, genuine sound, and it startled them both. He gestured toward the fire. "Sit, eat something. You'll regain strength faster with company than with ghosts." She joined him at the table, and for a time silence fell between them. The crackle of the hearth filled the room. At last she spoke. "Do you live here alone?" "With too many memories for company," he said. Her gaze softened. "I'm sorry." He inclined his head. "And you, Miss Graves, what shadows follow you?" She looked down at her plate, her voice barely a whisper. Some shadows do not let go. Something in her tone stirred him. An ache he had long thought buried. When she finally retired for the night, Nathaniel remained by the fire, staring into the embers. The house was filled with whispers, of servants, of memories, of the past he'd tried to forget, but above them all, one thought echoed louder than the rest. "Who are you, Eleanor Graves, shadows of her past?" The next morning dawned clearer than any in recent memory. The moors lay hushed beneath a veil of mist, the air damp and still. Blackthorn Hall, with its ivy-covered walls and brooding towers, looked almost peaceful under the pale gold of the rising sun. Eleanor awoke to the faint song of larks outside her window. For a moment, she did not know where she was. The softness of the bed, the warmth of the hearth, the faint scent of lavender soap. It all felt too gentle, too unreal. Then the events of the past days returned, and her body tensed as though she'd been struck. The rain, the carriage, the men on horseback, the letters. She pushed the thoughts away, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Her hands trembled as she rose and dressed in the plain gown Mrs. Weatherby had left out for her. It was simple but clean, more than she'd had in days. When she descended to the breakfast room, she found Nathaniel already there. He was reading a letter by the window, dressed in a dark morning coat that seemed to mirror the mood of the house. His black hair was neatly combed, though a lock had fallen loose over his brow. He looked up when she entered, and something softened in his expression. "Good morning, Miss Graves." "Good morning, my lord." "Did you sleep?" "Somewhat." She hesitated. "The storm dreams still come," he nodded. "They'll fade, given time." The table between them was laden with bread, fruit, and steaming tea. She ate sparingly, while he returned to his correspondence, though she could feel his gaze flick toward her now and then, as if trying to solve a riddle. After a while, he folded the letter carefully. "I'm riding into Windermere this afternoon," he said. "The road will be clear again. If there is any word you'd like me to send on your behalf, I can see it done discreetly." She froze. "No letters?" "Are you certain?" "Quite." Her voice was sharper than intended, and she softened it quickly. "Forgive me. I only wish to stay forgotten." Nathaniel inclined his head, though curiosity burned behind his calm facade. "As you wish." Later that day, Eleanor found herself wandering the East Gardens. The storm had left the earth damp and fragrant. Roses drooped heavy with rain, and the hedgerows glittered with dew. She walked slowly, letting the quiet steady her thoughts. It had been 3 days since she'd arrived, 3 days since she'd run from him. "Don't think of it," she warned herself. "You're safe now, for the moment." The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. Nathaniel rode past on his black gelding, the horse's mane gleaming like silk. He reined in near the gate and looked back, spotting her among the rose bushes. For a fleeting second, their eyes met, his steady, hers uncertain. Then he nodded once, formally, and rode out. She watched until he disappeared into the mist. Only when he was gone did she realize she had been holding her breath. In town, Nathaniel dismounted outside the post office. Windermere was small, cobblestone streets, shuttered windows, and the faint smell of smoke from the bakers' ovens. He was greeted with polite bows and curious stares. The people respected him, though they called him the ghost of Blackthorn behind closed doors. Inside the post office, an older gentleman stood sorting letters. "Ah, Lord Harrow," he said cheerfully. "A rare sight. Collecting your post, sir?" "Yes, Mr. Fallon." Nathaniel handed him a sealed envelope. "And sending this to my solicitor in London. Urgent." As Fallon weighed the letter, he said, "Strange news these past days. A carriage was found overturned near the ravine. 2 horses dead, but no passengers in sight." Nathaniel's attention sharpened. "When was this?" "The night of the storm. Some say robbers were about. Others that a lady fled the wreck." He smiled conspiratorially. "You've not heard a thing, my lord." Nathaniel's expression gave nothing away. "No." He left quickly, but the words followed him all the way home. By the time he returned, dusk had settled once more. The hall glowed with lamplight, and the faint murmur of voices came from the drawing-room. Mrs. Weatherby met him at the door, her face pale. "My lord, there's a gentleman here asking for you. Says he's from London." Nathaniel frowned. "At this hour?" "Yes, sir. He's waiting in the study." When Nathaniel entered, the stranger turned. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with the assurance of wealth. A travelling coat hung over his arm, and his gloves were damp from the road. "Lord Harrow," he said with a practised smile. "Forgive my intrusion. My name is Charles Pembroke." Nathaniel inclined his head. "Mr. Pembroke." I was travelling through Windmere when I heard certain reports. A carriage accident, a missing lady." Pembroke's tone was smooth, but his eyes were cold. "I wondered if perhaps anyone matching that description had been found." Nathaniel's heartbeat quickened, though his face remained impassive. "You are searching for someone?" "Yes, my fiancée." The words fell like ice. "Her name?" Nathaniel asked quietly. "Eleanor Graves." Upstairs, Eleanor stood frozen in the corridor, having heard every word through the half-open door. Her hands shook violently. "He's here!" She backed away, her breath catching in her throat. Panic surged through her chest. The memory of his hand gripping her wrist, of the cruel hiss in his voice, flooded back with unbearable clarity. "You belong to me, Eleanor. Remember that." Her vision blurred. She stumbled into her chamber, shutting the door with trembling hands. Below, the conversation continued. "Miss Graves has been missing 3 days," Pembroke said smoothly. "We were to be married next month. There was an unfortunate quarrel. I fear she fled in distress. You understand, of course, the embarrassment such matters cause a family." Nathaniel studied him carefully. The man's words were polite enough, but his eyes gleamed with something that unsettled him. "And you believe she may have come this way?" Pembroke smiled thinly. "The moors are treacherous. Perhaps she sought shelter. I only wish to ensure her safety." "Of course," Nathaniel's tone was neutral. "If she is found, I will inform you immediately." Pembroke rose, donning his gloves. "Your reputation for honour precedes you, Lord Harrow. I trust you'll do the proper thing." Nathaniel watched him leave, the firelight flickering against the window panes. Only when the sound of hooves faded into the distance did he speak aloud. "She's no fiancée of yours, is she, Pembroke?" That night, Eleanor appeared at his door. She was pale, eyes wide with terror. "You saw him," she whispered. Nathaniel didn't deny it. "He claims you're to be married." Her voice broke. "He lies. Then tell me the truth." Tears welled in her eyes. "If I do, you'll turn me out." "I will not." For a moment, the room held only the sound of the fire. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, "Charles Pembroke ruined my father. He used deceit, forged documents, took everything we owned. When my father confronted him, She stopped, her throat tightening. "He struck him. Father died of his injuries a week later. Pembroke told everyone it was an accident." Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "And he sought to marry you afterward?" "Yes, to claim what little remained of our name." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "When I refused, he threatened to have me committed, to silence me." Her tears fell freely now. "So I ran. I took the deed my father left hidden. It's the only proof of Pembroke's crimes." Nathaniel's gaze softened. "And you think he's come for it?" "I know he has." He rose slowly, stepping toward her. "Then you are safe here, Eleanor. I give you my word." Her lips trembled. "You don't understand what he's capable of." He met her gaze steadily. "I've faced worse monsters than Charles Pembroke." She stared at him for a long time, then whispered, "Why are you helping me?" "Because once someone helped me when I didn't deserve it," he said quietly. "And because you looked at me, that night in the rain, as though I might still be capable of good." Her breath caught. For the first time, she did not look away. And in that fragile silence, something shifted between them, something neither could name, but both could feel. Outside, the wind stirred again over the moors. The storm had passed, but its shadow had only just begun. A fire beneath the frost. For several days, peace returned to Blackthorn Hall, or something that resembled it. The storm clouds had lifted from the moors, leaving behind wide sunlit stretches of green. From the windows, Eleanor could see wildflowers trembling in the breeze, their colours vivid against the pale sky. Yet inside, unease lingered like the chill of unburned embers. Charles Pembroke's visit had changed everything. Though he had departed with polite words and an elegant bow, Eleanor knew he would not stop until he found her, or the document she carried. She had hidden it deep within her trunk, wrapped in plain linen, though she hardly slept for fear of discovery. Each night she would wake at the faintest sound, her heart hammering, only to find the house silent. And each morning Lord Harrow would greet her at breakfast with calm civility, as though nothing in the world were amiss. But beneath that calm, something new had taken root, a quiet, charged awareness. One afternoon, Eleanor found herself in the library. The room was vast and lined with shelves that reached nearly to the ceiling. Dust motes drifted lazily through the sunlight, and the scent of old paper filled the air. She traced her fingers along the spines of the books, histories, treatises, volumes of poetry. She paused at a worn collection of verse and pulled it down. When she opened it, a loose scrap of parchment fluttered out. It was a sketch, faint but beautifully drawn. A woman's face, serene and thoughtful. Eleanor recognized the hand immediately. The same precision, the same restrained emotion. Nathaniel's. The woman in the drawing was lovely, her gaze tender yet distant, the late Lady Harrow. Eleanor stared at it, a strange ache filling her chest. She had not asked about the Lord's past, but the servant's whispers had told her enough. That his wife had died suddenly 6 years ago, that he had withdrawn from society, that grief had made him into the reclusive man he was now. She slipped the drawing carefully back between the pages. Her name was Isabella. Eleanor turned sharply. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, his voice low but steady. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean—" He shook his head. "It's all right. She was my wife." She hesitated. "She looks kind." "She was," he said simply, "kind and too gentle for this world. She died of fever before the doctors could reach her. Since then the house has felt quieter." There was a long pause. Then Eleanor said softly, "Grief leaves echoes, doesn't it? Even when the world moves on." He regarded her curiously. "You speak as one who knows." "I do," she whispered. "My father. He was everything I had. When he died, the world stopped making sense." Nathaniel's gaze softened. "And yet you survived." "Barely." They stood there for a moment, two people bound by loss, by silence, by the unspoken understanding that pain can shape, but not destroy. Finally, Nathaniel said, "Would you walk with me, Miss Graves? The air might do us both good." They walked through the rose garden at dusk. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and violet, and the air was sweet with the scent of rain-soaked blooms. Eleanor lifted her skirt slightly as they strolled the gravel path. The world felt almost peaceful again, though she could not shake the feeling that something watched them from beyond the hedges. "I never asked," Nathaniel said quietly, "what you plan to do now. You can't hide here forever." "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to run until the world forgets my name. But the rest?" She hesitated. "The rest wants to stay." He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Stay." Her cheeks flushed. "Only until it's safe." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Safety is a fickle thing, Miss Graves. It has a habit of vanishing when you reach for it." "Then perhaps I'll stop reaching," she said softly. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The wind lifted a strand of her hair across her cheek. He reached up, hesitated, and brushed it away. The touch was brief, but it lingered between them like a spark in the air. Eleanor's breath caught. "You shouldn't," she murmured. "Perhaps not," he said quietly, "but I find I've grown weary of what I should do." Their eyes met, and the unspoken tension of days seemed to draw tight, like the last note of a song held too long. But before either could speak, a shout came from the courtyard. Nathaniel dropped his hand and turned sharply. "Stay here!" He strode away, his coat flaring behind him. Eleanor followed at a distance, her heart racing. At the gate, 2 riders had arrived, men in dark coats, their horses lathered from the journey. The butler was arguing with them, his voice stern but controlled. Nathaniel approached. "What is the meaning of this?" One of the men tipped his hat. "Forgive the intrusion, my lord. We're in search of a runaway, Miss Eleanor Graves. Her guardian fears for her safety." Eleanor froze behind the hedge, every muscle rigid. Nathaniel's voice was calm, but cold. "You were here 2 days ago under another name, were you not? Pembroke sent you." The man smiled thinly. "We only wish to speak with her." "You'll speak with no one," Nathaniel said, his tone like steel. "She is under my protection. Tell your master that if he values his standing in this county, he will cease his pursuit at once." The man's eyes darkened. "That's a bold claim, my lord. Some might say you've grown too fond of the lady in question." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Get off my land!" The riders exchanged glances, then turned their horses. As they galloped away, the echo of their hooves lingered in the damp evening air. Eleanor stepped from the hedge, her face pale. "You shouldn't have done that." He turned to her. "What would you have me do? Hand you over to a man who means you harm? You've only made it worse. He'll come back, with more men. He won't stop." "Then let him. Come," Nathaniel said fiercely. "I will not let him take you." She stared at him, chest rising and falling. Why? Why risk everything for me?" His eyes burned with something raw, unguarded. "Because I cannot bear to see fear rule you. Not here. Not while I still have the power to stop it." Her lips parted, but words failed her. Then, slowly, she stepped closer. "You don't even know who I am." He met her gaze steadily. "Perhaps not. But I know what you are not. You're not the liar he paints you to be." For a moment, the world seemed to shrink to the space between them. The garden, the setting sun, the hum of the wind, all of it faded into silence. Eleanor felt the warmth of his breath, saw the faint pulse at his throat. Her heart beat so fast she thought it might break. And yet neither moved closer, because in that fragile pause lay everything they could not say. That night the house slept uneasily. Nathaniel paced before the fire in his study, every instinct warning him that Pembroke would not retreat so easily. He poured himself a glass of brandy, staring at the flames. "You fool," he thought. "She is a guest, nothing more." But the memory of her eyes, blue as the storm itself, haunted him. Upstairs, Eleanor sat by her window, gazing into the darkness. The rain had begun again, a soft, steady whisper against the glass. She pressed her palm to the cold pane, remembering the night he'd found her, remembering how his voice had sounded through the storm. "You're safe now." The words that had saved her. The words she could no longer stop hearing. In the stables, the stable boy roused from a doze as a distant noise reached his ears, a horse's faint whinny. He stepped outside, frowning into the fog. Far across the moor, a lantern flickered once, twice, then vanished. Someone was watching the house, and the storm that would change everything was about to return. The truth that shattered everything. It began as a distant rumble over the hills, a low growl that rolled through the valley like the echo of something ancient and inevitable. By dusk, the wind had risen to a furious howl, rattling the shutters and sweeping cold rain against the windows of Blackthorn Hall. Nathaniel stood at his study window, watching the lightning fork across the moors. Each flash illuminated the wet stone walls and the skeletal trees, their branches thrashing wildly in the wind. Something in his chest felt the same, a restless, churning energy he could neither name nor control. Eleanor had been quiet all day, too quiet. He had seen her in the morning room, her face pale, her hands folded in her lap as she stared out at the rain. She'd barely touched her breakfast. He told himself to leave her be, to give her the space she clearly wanted. But when the storm broke in earnest, some instinct stronger than reason drove him from his chair. He found her in the gallery. The long hall was dim, the sconces throwing wavering light across the portraits of generations past. She stood before one of the windows, gazing out into the blackness, her shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders. "You shouldn't be here," he said gently. "The glass might shatter." She didn't turn. "I couldn't sleep." He stepped closer. "You've been troubled for days, ever since those men came." At that she flinched. "Eleanor," he said softly, "if there's something I should know, if you're in danger, I can only help if you trust me." She turned then, and the look in her eyes stopped him cold. "I do trust you," she said. "That's what frightens me." He frowned. "Why should that?" A sharp knock echoed from the far end of the hall. The butler appeared, breathless. "My lord, there's someone at the gatehouse. He refuses to leave, says it concerns Miss Graves." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Who?" The butler hesitated. "He gave no name, but he bears Pembroke's crest." By the time Nathaniel reached the courtyard, the rain was pouring in sheets, soaking through his coat and plastering his hair to his forehead. A carriage stood at the gate, its lamps dim behind a curtain of rain. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. Charles Pembroke himself, cloaked in black, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "Good evening, Lord Harrow," he called over the wind. "I believe you've something of mine." Nathaniel's voice was like thunder. "You have no claim here." "Oh, but I do," Pembroke said smoothly. "Miss Eleanor Graves, my fiancée." Eleanor gasped behind him. "That's a lie." Pembroke's gaze slid to her, his smile tightening. "You're still as dramatic as ever, my dear. Surely you wouldn't deny the engagement your late father arranged?" She stepped forward, trembling. "My father never—" "Oh, but he did." Pembroke pulled a folded letter from his coat, sealed with an insignia that glimmered in the lamplight. His signature, his words. "You were promised to me in exchange for the settlement of his debts. Did you really think you could run forever?" Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "You came to collect a debt, not a wife." Pembroke's eyes gleamed. "And yet she bears something far more valuable than her hand. The deed to the Graves estate, a document that by rights belongs to me." Eleanor's blood ran cold. Nathaniel turned sharply toward her. "Eleanor, what is he talking about?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Pembroke's smile widened. "Ah, you didn't tell him. How charmingly naive." He turned to Nathaniel. "Allow me to enlighten you, my lord. When her father died, he left his estate and considerable debts to this young lady. I offered her protection, and in return she agreed to transfer the estate to me. But instead, she fled in the night, taking the deed with her." Eleanor found her voice at last, trembling but fierce. "Because you murdered him!" The wind howled. through the courtyard, flinging rain into her face. Nathaniel froze. "What did you say?" Her voice cracked. "He poisoned my father for his property. I found the papers, the ones he forged. I ran before he could silence me too." Pembroke laughed, a low, ugly sound. "You see what grief does, Harrow? Turns women into storytellers. Her father drank himself to death, and she's been blaming me ever since." Nathaniel's hand curled into a fist. "Get off my land." "I'll leave," Pembroke said coolly, "once I have what's mine." He extended his hand toward Eleanor. "The deed, Miss Graves, now." She clutched her shawl tighter. "I burned it." He went still. "You what?" "I burned it," she repeated, her eyes blazing. "It will never be yours." For a moment, silence reigned. Only the storm roared. Then Pembroke's expression twisted. "You foolish girl!" He lunged forward. Nathaniel stepped between them, catching his arm. The two men struggled, the rain turning the cobblestones slick beneath their boots. Pembroke drew something from his coat, a knife glinting in the lightning. Eleanor screamed. Nathaniel struck his wrist hard, sending the blade clattering to the ground. "You'll regret this, Harrow," Pembroke spat. "You're protecting a liar, a thief." "I'm protecting an innocent woman," Nathaniel snarled. The butler and two servants rushed forward, restraining Pembroke as he struggled. "Throw him out," Nathaniel ordered. "If he sets foot on this estate again, I'll see him arrested." Pembroke's eyes burned with hatred. "You think you can save her? She'll destroy you as she's destroyed everyone else." Then, with a violent twist, he broke free from the servant's grasp long enough to hiss, "You'll learn what she really is soon enough." They forced him back into his carriage. The horses reared, and the vehicle lurched down the road, vanishing into the storm. When the gates closed behind him, silence fell. Nathaniel turned slowly toward Eleanor. She was trembling, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered against her face. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. "About my father, yes, I swear it, but the deed—" He cut her off gently. "No, I meant the rest. What did he mean, that you'd destroy me?" She stared at him helplessly. "I don't know." He stepped closer. "Eleanor, look at me." When she did, he saw it, the fear, the exhaustion, the truth shining in her eyes like moonlight through mist. "You've been through hell," he said softly. "You don't need to face it alone anymore." Her breath hitched. "You don't understand. He'll come back. He won't stop until—" "Then let him try." The words left his lips before he could think. And then, without meaning to, without permission, he reached out and pulled her against him. She froze for half a heartbeat, then melted into him, her hands gripping his, coat as though it were the only thing keeping her standing. The rain poured around them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The world had narrowed to the warmth of their bodies, the thunder rolling above, the taste of tears and rain mingled on her lips. When he finally drew back, her face was inches from his. "Eleanor," he whispered, "whatever comes next, we face it together." She nodded, her voice barely audible. "Together." That night Nathaniel ordered the gates locked, the servants on watch, and the hounds loosed across the grounds. But even with every precaution, he couldn't shake the dread that crept along his spine. In his heart, he knew Pembroke's threats were not empty. And somewhere, beneath the storm and silence, fate was shifting, drawing them toward the final reckoning neither could escape. The storm returns. It began softly at first, a delicate tapping on the roof tiles, a whisper across the windows that might have been mistaken for wind. But before the servants stirred, before the grey light of morning crept into the halls, the whisper became a roar, Blackthorn Hall awoke beneath a tempest. The storm raged with a ferocity unseen since the night Eleanor first arrived, as though nature itself had returned to finish what it began. Nathaniel Harrow stood at the window of his bedchamber, watching lightning split the sky. Below, the moors churned like a living sea. The storm mirrored the unease clawing through his chest. He had not slept, not after what had happened in the courtyard. Every word of Pembroke's accusations replayed in his mind. You'll learn what she really is soon enough. He hated himself for remembering them, hated the flicker of doubt they had planted. Eleanor had told him the truth. He had seen the terror in her eyes, felt the tremor in her voice. She had no reason to lie. And yet, something in Pembroke's tone, something smug, certain, gnawed at the edges of his trust. He turned sharply at a knock on the door. "Come in," he called. Mrs. Webb, the housekeeper, entered, wringing her hands. "My lord, I thought you should know. The stables have been broken into. 2 horses are missing." His brow furrowed. "Stolen?" She hesitated. "Or taken? The boy swears he saw someone near the paddock before dawn. A woman cloaked." Nathaniel's pulse quickened. "Eleanor, I cannot say, sir." He didn't wait another word. He strode past her, down the stairs, through the hall, and out into the storm. The rain stung his face as he crossed the courtyard. Mud splashed beneath his boots, soaking through to his knees. He reached the stables, flung the door open, and called, "Eleanor!" The horses whinnied nervously, stamping in their stalls. The stable boy, pale and trembling, emerged from the shadows. "I saw her, my lord," he stammered. "Miss Graves, or someone like her. She saddled the mare herself, left not 10 minutes ago." "Did she say where she was? Going?" The boy shook his head. "Only that she had to stop someone, before it was too late." Nathaniel didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat, mounted the nearest horse, and rode into the storm. The wind was merciless, tearing at his cloak, blinding him with rain. The moors stretched ahead, vast, endless, unforgiving. He followed the faint trail of hoofprints through the mud until they vanished near the edge of the woods. Then, through the storm, he saw it, a flicker of lantern light. He spurred his horse forward. At the edge of the trees, he found her. Eleanor was on foot, her cloak whipping around her like a banner in the wind. Her hair was soaked, her face pale, but her eyes burned with fierce resolve. "Eleanor!" he shouted above the thunder. She turned, startled, then relief flashed across her face. "You shouldn't have followed me." "I'm not letting you face him alone." "It's not him," she cried. "It's someone else, someone inside the house." Nathaniel reined his horse hard. "What are you talking about?" She took a step closer, shouting over the rain. "I found letters, hidden in the library, Pembroke's letters, to your steward, Mr. Whitlow. He's been feeding him information for months. He's working with him." Nathaniel's stomach dropped. "Whitlow? He's the one who let Pembroke onto the grounds. And now he's gone. I saw him ride out just before dawn. He must be taking more than horses with him." Nathaniel's mind reeled. The estate's accounts, the documents. Whitlow had access to everything. "He's heading for the river crossing," Eleanor said breathlessly. "If he reaches the village, Pembroke will have everything he needs to destroy you." Nathaniel didn't hesitate. "Then we stop him." He reached down, hauled her onto the horse behind him, and together they rode into the heart of the storm. The path to the river was half flooded. Lightning flashed, illuminating the world in stark, blinding silver. Trees bent and groaned under the weight of the wind. Eleanor clung to him, her face pressed to his shoulder, every muscle in her body tense. "There!" she cried suddenly, pointing ahead. Through the sheets of rain, they saw a lone rider struggling along the bank, a lantern swinging from his saddle. Nathaniel urged the horse forward. "Whitlow!" he bellowed. The man turned, his eyes wide with shock. Then, with a curse, he kicked his horse into a gallop. The chase tore across the river flats. Mud sprayed, thunder cracked, and for a breathless moment the world was nothing but hooves and heartbeats. Whitlow reached the bridge first, a narrow span of wood slick with rain. Nathaniel was seconds behind. "Stop!" Nathaniel shouted. "You'll kill us all!" Whitlow turned his head, and in that instant lightning struck the tree beside the bridge. It splintered, crashing down across the planks with a roar. The horses reared. Whitlow's mount slipped, hooves scrambling. The man fell, tumbling down the bank into the raging current below. "Whitlow!" Eleanor screamed. Nathaniel dismounted, rushing to the edge, but it was too late. The river had him, and the satchel clutched in his hands vanished beneath the foam. They stood in stunned silence as the rain hammered around them. Eleanor trembled. "He's gone!" Nathaniel turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Then so is the proof of everything." She shook her head. "Not everything. The letters, I still have them, hidden in my room." His eyes widened slightly. "You kept them?" "I was afraid," she whispered, "in case no one believed me." He exhaled, half in relief, half in disbelief. "You truly think of everything." She met his gaze steadily. "I had to. No one ever has." Something in her tone, in that small, aching confession, broke whatever distance still stood between them. Nathaniel reached for her hand, cold and trembling in his. "You have me now." For a heartbeat, she stared at him. And then, as if surrendering to something greater than both of them, she stepped into his arms. They stood there in the storm's fury, soaked and shaking, clinging to one another as though the world might end and take them too. When their lips met, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, fierce, the kind of kiss that belonged not to peace, but to survival. Lightning flared around them, thunder cracked, and still they held on. Because even in the heart of chaos, they had found something unshakable. By the time they returned to Blackthorn Hall, dawn was breaking. The storm had spent itself, leaving behind a bruised sky and rivers of silver mist over the fields. The servants were gathered anxiously in the courtyard. Whitlow's treachery had spread through the house like wildfire. Mrs. Webb approached, wringing her apron. "My lord, we found his quarters ransacked. He took ledgers, silver, and your seal." Nathaniel nodded grimly. "He won't be using them." He turned to Eleanor, her face pale but resolute. "It's over." She shook her head softly. "No. Pembroke will hear of his death soon enough. He'll come for me again, and for you." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Then let him. This time I'll be ready." Their eyes met, and for the first time since that night, she'd been found trembling in the rain. Neither looked away. Whatever storm came next, they would face it together. When morning came, the dawn came slowly, pale and trembling over the horizon. Mist lay thick across the moors, veiling the land in ghostly white, and the air was still, the kind of silence that follows ruin and survival alike. Eleanor stood by the tall windows of Blackthorn Hall, her hands resting lightly on the sill. The storm was gone. In its wake, the world glistened, every leaf, every stone, every blade of grass dripping with silver dew. It was over, or so she told herself. In truth, a storm still lived inside her. Whitlow's treachery, the chase through the moors, the desperate kiss beneath the lightning. It all played behind her eyes like a fevered dream. She should have felt safe. but Pembroke's shadow lingered in every corner of her mind. Nathaniel had sent word to the magistrate at dawn, dispatching riders with the evidence she'd hidden away. The letters that proved Whitlow's betrayal and Pembroke's conspiracy. Justice would come, but she had learned by now that justice was not always swift, nor merciful. Nathaniel entered the room quietly, his steps measured, his presence calm. He looked different this morning, less like the brooding master of the estate and more like the man he might have been before grief had hollowed him out. The faint light softened his features, caught in his eyes like the reflection of something long denied. "You haven't slept," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "Nor have you." He crossed to stand beside her. Outside, the land stretched endless and quiet, and for a moment they simply breathed together. "It's strange," she said after a while. "I thought the storm would take everything, but it feels as though it's given something back instead." "What do you mean?" She turned to him. "You, this house, the chance to start again." Nathaniel's gaze softened. "You gave me that chance, Eleanor. I'd forgotten what it was to feel alive until you came to my door that night." She looked away, her throat tightening. "I was half dead when you found me." "And yet," he said, stepping closer, "you saved me all the same." For a moment, the room seemed to hum with the unspoken things between them, the nights of fear and trust, of anger and longing. But before either could speak again, the butler appeared in the doorway, face grave. "My lord, riders have been sighted on the eastern road." Nathaniel's hand went instinctively to the window latch. "How many?" "Just one, sir, but the messenger says Pembroke himself rides at their head." Eleanor's breath caught. "So soon?" Nathaniel turned to her, calm but resolute. "Then we finish this." By the time Pembroke's carriage reached the courtyard, the morning mist had begun to lift. Sunlight poured weakly through the thinning fog, striking the wet cobblestones. Pembroke stepped down, immaculate despite his journey, his expression smooth, his voice cool. "My Lord Harrow, I trust you've had time to reconsider your rash decisions." Nathaniel faced him squarely. "You mean my refusal to hand over an innocent woman to a murderer?" Pembroke's smile never wavered. "Big words for a man who hides behind sentiment. The magistrate won't believe a word she says. She's a fugitive and a liar." Eleanor emerged then, calm and steady. "And yet," she said softly, "I'm the one with your letters." Pembroke's eyes flickered. "What letters?" "The ones Whitlow delivered," Nathaniel said coldly, producing a sealed envelope. "In his haste to flee, he left quite a trail. The magistrate already has copies." For the first time, Pembroke's composure cracked. "You can't prove—" "Oh, but I can," Nathaniel cut in. "You see, Whitlow confessed before he died. Every transaction, every forged document. You'll hang for it, Pembroke." Pembroke's face twisted with fury. "You think this changes anything? You think she'll ever be free? She's ruined, and so are you." He lunged forward, but Nathaniel caught his arm, twisting it behind his back. "Enough," he said, voice low and steady. "Your power ends here." Guards from the magistrate's office stepped forward, seizing Pembroke by the shoulders. The man struggled, shouting curses that echoed off the stone walls, until at last his voice was swallowed by distance and wind. When silence fell again, Eleanor swayed. All at once, the weight she'd carried for months lifted, leaving her dizzy and trembling. Nathaniel caught her before she fell. "It's over," he murmured, "truly over." She nodded, her voice breaking. "I never thought I'd live to see this day." "You will see many more," he said softly, "and you will never face another storm alone." That evening, Blackthorn Hall was quiet once more. The servants moved softly through the corridors, restoring order where chaos had ruled. The lamps burned low, casting a gentle amber glow through the great rooms. Nathaniel found Eleanor in the garden. The sky had turned gold and violet again, the same colours that had filled the air on the day they first walked there together. She stood by the fountain, gazing toward the cliffs beyond the fields. "I thought I might find you here," he said. She smiled faintly. "It feels strange, doesn't it, to have peace?" "It suits you," he said. For a long time, they stood in companionable silence. The world seemed softer now, the air warmer, the light gentler. Then Eleanor turned to him, her voice quiet but steady. "I should go back to Gravesend eventually. It's still my home." He hesitated, searching her eyes. "And if I asked you to make this your home instead?" Her lips parted. "Nathaniel, I know what it is to lose everything," he said, stepping closer. "But I also know that sometimes, rarely, the world gives you a second chance. I don't want to waste mine." Tears shimmered in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of something bright and fierce. "Are you asking what I think you are?" He smiled, the first true, unguarded smile she had ever seen from him. "I'm asking you to stay." She took a slow breath, the sea breeze lifting her hair. "Then I will." He reached for her hand and she let him. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the world in the colours of fire and forgiveness. Weeks later, when the first snow fell on the moors, travellers passing through, the valley would sometimes speak of the Lord and Lady of Blackthorn Hall, the ones who had tamed both scandal and storm. They said that on wild, windy nights one might still glimpse two figures standing together on the cliffs, side by side, facing the sea. He had found her trembling in the rain, and he had never let her go again.